episode of Books Central, the podcast for book lovers. I'm your host, Abbie, and today, I'm excited to have Aimee-Leigh, a published poet, with me to talk about the poetry writing process.
Thank you, Abbie. It's great to be here.
So, Aimee-Leigh, poetry writing is a unique form of creative expression. Can you share with us your process of writing poetry?
Sure, Abbie. For me, poetry writing begins with an idea or experience that is significant to me. I tend to jot down notes, observations, and emotions related to that idea or experience. Later on, I try to connect them in a way that conveys the essence of the message I want to share with my audience. Sometimes I start with a line that comes spontaneously, eventually growing into a poem.
That's an interesting approach. Can you elaborate on some of the tried and tested methods every poet should follow to generate meaningful and engaging content?
The first thing to remember is to give yourself permission to be creative and let your imagination guide you. But at the same time, there are some rules of poetry writing that one should follow. These include rhythm, meter, verse construction, and the use of literary devices such as personification, metaphors, and similes.
Could you explain each of those rules to our listeners?
Of course, Abbie. Verse construction refers to the length and structure of the lines that make up a poem. Rhythm is the pattern of stressed and unstressed syllables in a line of poetry. Meter, on the other hand, is the pattern of the beats in a line of poetry. All of these aspects help to create a flow that draws readers into the poem.
That's a great explanation. Can you analyze some famous poets' works and discuss how they utilize these rules in their writing?
Sure, Abbie. Let's take the poem, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, by Robert Frost, for example. The poem follows a strict iambic tetrameter, where the second syllable in each foot is stressed. This creates a cadence that is easy to follow and makes the poem sound like a musical composition. Also, the short lines of the poem create a sense of urgency, and the repetition of the final line adds a sense of finality and closure.
That's a great example, Aimee-Leigh. Could you give our listeners practical tips and examples to help inspire novice poets?
For novice poets, I'd suggest writing about personal experiences and emotions. Remember to use concrete and sensory language to create vivid images for your readers. Don't be afraid to experiment with different forms and structures, and always edit and revise your work until it becomes the best version of itself. Also, reading the works of other poets can inspire you towards different styles and forms and help you discover new literary devices to explore.
Those are beautiful tips, Aimee-Leigh. Thank you for sharing them with us. Finally, can you invite our listeners to share their experiences or ask questions about poetry writing?
Absolutely, Abbie. I'm always happy to hear from fellow poetry writers and enthusiasts. Feel free to reach me on social media or my website if anyone has any questions, suggestions, or ideas.
Thank you, Aimee-Leigh, for sharing your knowledge and experiences with us today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Abbie. It's been an enjoyable conversation.
As always, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our podcast, and I hope all you budding poetry have found some inspiration today. Remember to tune in next time to Books Central Podcast.